Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson.
And I'm Haley Dudley.
And welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, What If Edition. It's been a while since we talked about What If, and before I get to talking about the subject of today's video, Haley, what is your experience with What If, either the show or the comics?
I have heard of the comics and stuff. I have not invested in any so far, and this is the first time that I have watched the actual show. So I've heard things about it, and I've heard good things. I just haven't actually watched it yet. Honestly, just one episode. Pretty good.
Excellent. But however, before we actually start talking about today's subject, I have something I want to say. So if you remember my previous What If edition MCU perspectives, I mentioned how the final episode of Season 1 was amazing. Great to see all these characters come together to face a common threat. It was cool that they were made up of characters throughout from every episode of What If. I just thought hands down it was the best gosh darn finale that the season could have had. Then I had time to think about it, and I started realizing that what I was saying was not actually what the episode was. Now, don't get me wrong, I liked the last episode of Season 1, but whereas while I said it was actually very good, at best it kind of fell into the okay category. It was still cool to see all these different heroes from all these different universes come together to face Ultron, and it was still cool that all of them were from previous episodes of What If, with one exception. But the fault of the episode lied in the fact that, one, it was mostly action, so it didn't really get a lot of time to have character moments between the characters, and as a result, it didn't feel as personal as it should have been. We only had, I think, one major time when they actually were able to bond together. One of the characters was not even from an episode in Season 1, as the episode that character was from got delayed to the next season, and despite the fact that it's supposed to be a team of variants of heroes from across the multiverse, Strange Supreme kind of carried the whole thing and did most of the work, which kind of made the rest of the team feel a little irrelevant, if that makes any sense. And as a result, it did kind of hamper the episode. Doesn't ruin it, but it did hamper it, and sadly that opinion also kind of extends to Season 1 as well. I still enjoyed Season 1 for what it was. I still love What If just for the premise, and Season 1 had that with abundance, but much like the comics that the show is based on, all the episodes in Season 1 were kind of mixed. Some were good, some not so much, and some were just kind of somewhere in the middle. And as a result, while I still liked What If, Season 1, it was just again an okay season. With that said, I was still very much excited to watch more of it because I love What If. I love the parallel universe gimmick. And guess what? Last week, the newest season of What If started. And unlike last season, they're not doing it week by week. They're releasing one new episode a day. Mind you, I'm not going to be doing a vlog every single day. If I did, I would have started these things already. As such, I'm still going to be sticking to my week-by-week schedule, but if you actually are keeping up with What If, congratulations, you're ahead of me. But with that said, we are still doing a vlog, and, she was coming by anyway to drop some stuff off, so I asked if she wanted to join, and she said yes.
Yeah, surprise guest.
Yes, but anyway, does the second season of What If carry all the hype, but does it actually improve on what came before? Well, let's take a look at it and find out, as today we're going to be discussing episode 10 of Marvel's What If / the first episode of season 2. What if Nebula joined the Nova Corps? So, we know Nebula, right? Mm-hmm. Of course we know Nebula. Nebula is, of course, a prominent character in the MCU. She's one of Thanos' two daughters, and as a consequence of her not being the favorite daughter, she tended to get the brunt of most of Thanos' punishments. Chindy likes Haley.
Yeah, it's the first time we've met, and I'm becoming a favorite.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
But yeah, anyway, so as a result, Nebula was constantly upgraded by her father and transformed into a cyborg until one day she eventually revolted when one of the people that Thanos hired to find the Infinity Stones, Ronan the Accuser, attempted to take the stone for himself and essentially told Nebula, "Join me or die," which she did. Eventually, though, she did end up joining the side of the Angels as she made up with her sister Gamora, who hated their dad as much as she did, and eventually she wound up joining forces with the heroes, and even nowadays is now a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But what if Gamora took a different path? What if, instead of becoming a Guardian, she became a part of Xandar's Nova Corps, which is where this episode takes place. And the point of divergence between this reality and the main MCU is when Ronan wound up betraying Thanos, as he wound up betraying him very early on in this timeline, and essentially just wrecked his shit, completely obliterated him, killed him, and sadly also killed Gamora, and left Nebula for dead. As a result, well, he never even got well, maybe he didn't get the chance to use it. Either way, as a result, he never really got the chance to look for the Power Stone, and so the Guardians of the Galaxy never formed. However, Nebula herself did manage to find a savior, as while she was drifting through space, a spaceship wound up finding her and bringing her on board, and the ones in charge of the spaceship were Xandar's Nova Corps, with Nova Prime herself actually advocating for Nebula to join their cause. And Nebula, kind of bereft of purpose, wound up seeking her out and essentially relished this chance for redemption, both because the Nova Prime saved her life and because she had nowhere else to go. As such, she wound up joining the Nova Corps and dedicated herself to their whole purpose. Basically, fight for the light, from the light. Was that the right thing?
But something like that. But I feel like it was the last bit was never turn away from it.
Yeah, that's right. Fight for the light, fight in the light, for the light, and don't turn away from the light, basically. And ultimately, Nebula took that phrase to heart, so much so that she became very much a dedicated member of the Nova Corps. Unfortunately, while we don't know if Ronan wound up eventually getting the Power Stone, he still launched an attack on Xandar, and without the Guardians there to stop him, well, it would have been a cakewalk. And as a result, Nova Prime kind of had to come to a very tough decision, as she wound up activating the planet's planetary shield, a shield that is so powerful that nothing can get through it, and it has a power source of 50 years. And as a result, when Ronan came to Xandar to destroy it, they essentially closed the door in his face and shut him out. Unfortunately, though, that also trapped everyone on Xandar in. So, basically, for years, everyone on Xandar was stuck there, and ultimately, Xandar itself's kind of become a crap hole. Now, ultimately, Nebula is still trying to uphold the slogan of the Nova Corps, doing everything they can to stand up for it, and, well, 5 years into this little quarantine, something does end up going down, as it turns out that on the planet, Yondu Udante, the head of the Ravagers, well, he was on the planet as well, and odds are he lived on Xandar and even had contact with Nebula. He ends up dead in an alley.
Mm-hmm.
And while Nebula wants to investigate this crime, she gets kind of shooed off by some of her superiors who think that they shouldn't let someone from the Shadow whatever the Dark Order, from the Dark Order take over this case, and so they just tell her to piss off. However, Nebula is not stupid and knows that they're not going to look for the particular things, and so after they look over Yondu's crime scene and then run off, Nebula goes back in herself and eventually manages to find that there is something that they overlooked, specifically Yondu's arrow. If Yondu was being attacked, odds are he would unsheathe that thing, and so utilizing a hologram of Yondu, basically Nebula is able to call the arrow back to her, and sure enough, there is a valuable piece of evidence on the thing, as it contains a schematic for something that she doesn't really understand, something that's out of the ordinary. And so she decides she needs to take this somewhere to figure out exactly what it is. However, she does end up reporting back to Nova Prime via hologram, and Nova Prime tells her that whatever this case is, it's something big, and that if they don't take care of it ASAP, then by dawn, Xandar's going to go down the crap hole. And so she personally assigns Nebula to the case, telling her that she needs to do whatever is necessary to solve it. As such, Nebula ends up taking the arrow to one of her contacts, and it turns out there are other people on the planet that we recognize, as she ends up going to an underground casino, and we see a fair bit of familiar faces in there. Like there's Groot running a craps table. We see Drax at a slot machine, and then raging when it. Yeah, when he rages when he loses, and at the bar, we see that Korg is serving drinks. And yes, he's still voiced by Taika Waititi. And it turns out, and basically Nebula tells him that she wants to see the big guy, so to speak. And he tells her again, she loves Haley. No. But anyway, he tells her, she says she wants to see the guy in charge of this place, and basically Korg says that he might not want to see her, he's on a hot streak, but eventually she does manage to get in. And it turns out the one in charge of this casino is Howard the Duck. Yeah, get down, Chindy, get down. Chindy? No. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Chindy was just causing an issue. But yeah, she ends up meeting with Howard the Duck, who owns the casino. And basically, while Howard doesn't want to talk business, Nebula's kind of forcing the issue, so he has to comply as he shoos away his girls and decides he has to end his hot streak. However, as such, she ends up showing Howard the schematics that she got from Yondu's arrow, and while Howard knows enough about what goes on in Xandar to know that this is some pretty big shit, he has absolutely no idea what this thing is either. However, Korg does, as he stops by to bring them drinks, and does say this is apparently a schematic for the core database.
It is a data brick, basically, including schematics for the shield.
Yeah, it basically has information on everything, but yeah, as you just said, it has information on the shield, and as a result, and as such, they suddenly start to realize why this info would be very important to whoever killed Yondu. As such, Nebula realizes that if this is tied in with the shield, then she needs to extract those codes right away and then delete them, because if they fall into the wrong hands and the shield goes down, Xandar is fucked. So, she realizes that if she wants to get those codes, she needs a bit of help. And as such, she decides that she needs to do a bit of shady stuff. As such, she ends up going to a prison facility, and in the prison facility is someone that actually did once manage to hack into Xandar's source code. And that person is Yon-Rogg from Captain Marvel movie. And basically, while Yon-Rogg is kind of relishing the fact that Nebula has come to get him, she does say that she needs his help and even promises to break him out of prison. And as such, yeah, like I said, prison break. As she gets into the prison via the proper means.
Goes through all of that bureaucracy.
But then immediately just breaks him out and sounds the alarm. Oh, you're just comfy now. But eventually, it causes a whole riot in the prison, and Nebula and Yon-Rogg manage to take this opportunity to get out of there, especially with Nebula opening all the cell doors to just cause a major prison riot. But eventually, they do end up managing to make their way to the core relay, though it does require a bit of quick thinking. Like, they go through wires, they have to go through security system, there's like a little underground entrance that gets flooded, but they do eventually manage to get into the main room, and the main frame is a little different than what you would expect a computer mainframe to be. It's like a big, giant orb. And as such, since Nebula is a member of Nova Corps, she manages to go up to it, and she's able to interface with it lickety-split. As such, once wires attached to her cybernetics, she's able to find all the source codes, find the source codes to the shield, and downloads them into her memory, telling this thing to delete the originals, as she'll just take them with her. However, it turns out that, well, if you're watching this, you'll notice this is a little too easy, right? I think we need a twist.
Of course.
Yeah, so Yon-Rogg ends up betraying her as he sticks, I guess, a USB drive?
I mean, I thought it was a taser, but...
I think it's a USB drive, because they downloaded the information out of her head into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he ends up plugging that into her head to get the codes, just as he's trying to log out of the mainframe, and it causes kind of a feedback loop, so to speak. And as a result, it turns out Yon-Rogg was in on this. Basically, the whole murder of Yondu thing, it was a ploy. Yes, this does have to do with the shield relay, but someone needed Nebula to access those codes, and Yon-Rogg was a part of the scheme from the beginning. And basically, the instant she got the codes, he was supposed to download them and just leave her for dead. As such, he manages to get away, but Nebula manages to get out of her, I guess, stasis, so to speak. Blue screen of death? Red screen of death?
Yeah, no, the swirling bleach ball of doom, whatever, computer you fucked it up thing you want to call it.
Yeah, basically unplug and replug, whatever. Basically, she manages to rip out the wires connecting her to the mainframe, and she chases after him, and she ends up following him to the sewers, but it eventually results in her taking a tumble, going down some more sewer pipes, even eventually kind of falling flat on her face somewhere else. But yeah, she does manage to catch up to Yon-Rogg as he gets in contact with the person who's behind all this, because after all, Yon-Rogg was in prison. He couldn't have killed Yondu on his own. And we soon learn who the one behind it all is. It's Nova Prime. So, why'd she do all this? Well, put simply, simple desperation. Because Xandar has gone down the crapper in just 5 years of isolation, she's beginning to think that maybe it's time they open up. After all, I keep blanking on his name. Ronan, yeah. After all, Ronan's essentially got his proverbial sword of Damocles over their heads. Well, she eventually thinks that it's better to live under him and surrender than be trapped in here and just continue to kill themselves. And so basically she wants to open the shields and let Ronan come in, especially since Ronan has promised that she'll remain in charge once he takes control. As such, Nebula just wonders why the hell she would do all this, but she doesn't. But again, it's just simple desperation. And of course, like with all last-minute villains and twists, immediately once she's revealed as the bad guy, all redeeming qualities are thrown right out the window about her, and she just tells any Nova Corps officers that she brought with her to just beat Nebula to death and then kill her and burn all the spare parts. Which, yeah, I'll give credit. It's a very brutal scene as Nova Prime and Yanrog go away. And so, yeah, all the officers proceed to just beat the shit out of her, with the guy who shooed Gamora off the crime scene earlier getting ready to deliver the killing blow with a laser. But Nebula, even while damaged, kicks ass and manages to knock them all aside, and Submit allows her to run away as she jumps off of a ledge into more pipes or water or whatever.
It wasn't appearing to her death, but not quite. So.
Yeah. As such, the guy ends up calling it, which is dumb, but whatever. Right. But Nebula realizes that she's kind of screwed. This is the head of the Nova Corps she's going up against, so and the Nova Corps is completely loyal to her. If she tried to say, "Hey, the head of the Nova Corps is the bad guy, we need to stop her," well, none of them would believe her, especially if Nova Prime said, "Oh, Nebula betrayed us, go get her." As such, she decides that if she really wants to take Nova Prime down, she needs to get a little smart. As such, she makes her way back to Howard's casino, and while Howard is nice enough to repair her and get her good as new, he's not exactly willing to go with her on this death-defying mission, mostly because he doesn't see the benefit to himself. Even if Ronan was in charge, why the hell should he care? If things get crappier, then people will just come to his business. He'll keep it going. They're already working underground, so it's not their issue. Then Nebula says that
he'll take his liquor license.
Yep, and that's what convinces Howard to join her, as he just pulls out all the guns. And so Howard, Nebula, Korg, and Groot, and I think there was a fifth guy. Was there a fifth guy? No, I think it was just those four.
No, it was just those four. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the four of them all just gear up and get ready to kick ass, with Nebula even getting her own fin thing, so she can use Yondu's spot. So you can use Yondu's arrow, and so they all go in. Hold on one second. Sorry, I have to be careful when I pause this thing. But anyway, yeah, they managed to make their way to the Nova Corps headquarters, and basically, while they are able to get through most of the guys, lickety split, especially thanks to Nebula using Yondu's arrow, well, it seems to be too late, as Nova Prime does manage to put in the source codes for the shield, and sure enough, just waiting outside is Ronan, just ready to get his ship in and start, invading Xandar. As such, that's when Nebula and her forces manage to arrive in the main room, and the Nova Prime tries telling Nebula, "Hey, come on, you could still join me, everything will still be better." But again, Nebula took an oath, and she swore to uphold it no matter what, so she pretty much just tells Nova Prime screw you. However, Nova Prime is still confident that, well, they got the shield open, everything's gonna go fine, right? Yeah. As the shield starts opening, it then starts closing.
Yeah, just enough to take a little bite out of Ronan's ship.
Yeah, as it's right there in the middle, and it blows up. It just blows up, but good. And so Nova Prime's like, what the hell is going on? Turns out Nebula knew Nova Prime was probably in on this from a very early point. So remember when I said how she contacted Nova Prime, and Nova Prime told her to solve this case by any means necessary? That kind of flies in the face of their oath. Fight for the light, in the light, and...
never turn from it.
Never turn from it. Basically, that's the exact antithesis of what their oath is supposed to be, so Nebula realized, oh, you're in on it. And I'll give credit where it's due. While I think the twist with Nova Prime is a little predictable, at the very least, I like that when that scene goes on, you can see that the gears in Nebula's head are turning. She does pick up on that little detail. It's actually I actually do dig that. So as such, she knew that this job was dirty from the start, and so when she got the codes for this force field, she essentially put in her own little code in there too. Yes, the shield will open, but it's also going to close on Ronan's ship, effectively making this whole plan moot because there's no Ronan to take over the planet, and, well, the Nova Prime has just been caught colluding with the guy who wants to kill Xandar.
Yeah, it's a great way to end up in jail.
Yeah. As such, immediately a firefight goes out as all of her as she orders her men to kill Nebula and her guys, and thankfully they are able to subdue them, which leads to an even funny scene where Yon-Rogg and one other guy try sneaking away, and they run into Korg, who just takes their bodies and just starts smacking them around like ragdolls. But eventually, Nebula does manage to catch up to Nova Prime as she tries getting into her ship, and just as she flies off, Nebula breaks through the windshield and begins messing with the steering, until eventually the ship crashes and sends Nova Prime and Nebula flying out. Ultimately, Nebula manages to get stable footing, but Nova Prime is holding onto a ledge. As such, Nebula tries offering Nova Prime a hand of salvation, telling her, just take my hand and I'll help you up, but Nova Prime is still in alpha bitch mode as she decides to, instead of, accept the help, to pull a gun, and as a result, by shooting the laser, it essentially deprives her of the time she could have used climbing up as she loses her grip and falls to her death. But, yeah. But, ultimately, the codes that they did put in for the shield were legitimate, and, well, Ronan is dead, the threat to Xandar is gone, so the shield starts opening up, and the people of Xandar marvel as they can finally see their son again. And of course, as Nebula takes this all in, Howard comes up, congratulates her, she assures Howard that his liquor license is safe, and so the episode ends. It looks like that Xandar is getting ready for a bright new day. So, there we go. So, your thoughts on the episode?
One of the big things I appreciated was, though Nebula is very, flat, sort of, robotic, for lack of a better way to put it, as a cyborg, in her expression and motivate, the way she portrays her motivation and everything throughout the whole show. You have this flat, then you get to the end and it's like, haha, I knew all along, and I've just been messing with you this whole time because I had to be sure that you were gonna fall for it. This... If she were an expressive sort of character, super over the top expressive, this child would look like she's with the string map and the push pins all over the place, sort of vibe. But I appreciate the detective Nebula to the point where I would like that to just be canon for her. That's a good life for that traumatized child. That one you can keep, But I will say that I while the twist with Nova Prime was pretty obvious, I still like the way it was done, because yes, it was pretty obvious, but it was also done with almost with perspective. Nova Prime assumed that no one else knew, and you have Nebula who's sitting there very aware of exactly what's going on the whole time.
Mm-hmm. She just needed to be there when it all went down so she could arrest Nova Prime.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that we get to also sit there and be aware that, hey man, this one's kind of sketch. It feels a little vindicating to be like, yeah. I knew it! Because, yes, it was obvious. It was an easy guess, but, it's nice to get it right every once in a while. But yeah, that was my thought process. What'd you think?
I liked it. From the outset, this episode feels very much different from any of the other episodes in What If. In Season 1 of What If, every episode kind of followed a similar formula. We were introduced to a universe, and then we had the Watcher typically narrate what the point of divergence was between this world and the other, which is great for narrative purposes as it catches you up as to what the heck's going on, but it also does create a sense of a disconnect, as if the story is being told to you. And while the Watcher's narration is still present in this episode, I like the way they kind of lead into it this time around. As it opens up with the Watcher with Nebula floating in space, which that's not about how the episode begins. It actually begins with Yondu being killed. But then we get to the flashback and we're shown the point of divergence in this world. It goes from his narration to Nebula's. And from that, you're immediately able to get a sense of personal connection as you understand, as just from the way she talks about the story, you can get a sense of what she's going through in this version of events. From her perspective, everything that she ever knew and loved is is gone, wiped away. Yes, she probably did not care about Thanos, but now she doesn't even have a sister anymore. There is nothing for her to go back to, and then suddenly here comes a guiding hand in the form of the Nova Corps who take her in. And since she was already trying to get a fresh start, she allows herself to essentially become part of the Nova Corps, take the oath, and actually put her best foot forward in trying to do something good. And I really like the determination there. You can really feel how dedicated she is to the Nova Corps' cause just in the way she explains everything.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that does remind me that I do appreciate the way that they did her Nebula did her narration better. And there was for the flashbacks and for the story, like the extra bits, just if only because it reminded me a lot of the 1940s detective movies and stuff, and it really helped set the vibe.
Exactly.
Appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I actually will say that too, because immediately by having that personal connection, it not only gets you in place for what the story is, but the thing is, unlike other previous what ifs that kind of run with the premise and tell the story of how things branch off, this one takes the premise, explains the consequences of the branching off, but then tells its own story in the bounds of this world. We already know that Nebula is a member of the Nova Corps, and because of what Ronan did, the Guardians are not a thing, and so we see the immediate consequences of that. But but what we see in the episode is how things work in this world. Even the world where, like, okay, maybe one exception to this was maybe in episode 2 of season 1 with What If T'Challa Became Star-Lord, as that actually did tell a pretty nice heist story with him in the role. But in this case, we're shown a world where Nebula is part of the Nova Corps, and then we see what she does as part of her work. As she takes what you said is like a sci-fi mystery noir case, and we see her going through the steps of trying to solve it and narrow down who killed Yondu, why they did it, and what their end goal is. I like that. I really do like that. And it's an immediate tone setter, especially in the first shot of Nebula finding Yondu just lying face down dead in an alley on Xandar. It just immediately lets you know, okay, what the hell's going on, and it draws you into the world and makes you want to see where things go. And another benefit, again, is Nebula. I love how they portray her in this episode, and you pointed this out as well when we were watching it. How, because unlike the main Marvel Universe, where Nebula was just constantly kind of wandering around trying to find a purpose until she made up with her sister and dedicate herself to not only stopping her father, but eventually joining the Guardians, unlike that Nebula who was kind of wandering aimlessly for a while, this Nebula has found a purpose. She has dedicated herself to the Nova Corps, and you can see just how seriously she takes this and just how hard she does the job. She does everything in her power to keep everything in line. She follows the book to the letter, and yes, she does a few shady things every now and then, but she never does anything out of the ordinary, with the exception of Yanrog.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that prison break was probably one of the most peaceful prison breaks that it could have been for being an extremely high security prison. They basically just ran out. Like, yes, she did cause a riot and everything, but, at least they didn't hint that there was, a huge prison break or anything like that, and that everyone was just so pissed at Nebula because she caused a prison break.
Yeah.
Which you would think they would bring up because,
Yeah.
the big thing.
But at the same time, when kind of going in with the knowledge that she was already suspecting that Nova Prime was in on this, with how she said, do whatever it takes, she kind of needed to play the role as best as she could without alerting suspicion. Because she was able to put together... Because once she figured out, okay, that has to involve the Corps, they must want me to go in there for something, so I at least need to play along up until that point so I can find out if my suspicions are true.
A calculated amount of a damage was allowed.
Yeah, essentially acceptable casualties without the actual casualties. Which I like. Which I like that. I do think it's cool. And I like the build-up throughout the story. It really does give a sense of unease and tension as you see this darkened Xandar cut off from the rest of the world. Even cut off from their sun because of the force field. It very much fits a sci-fi noir, and I love the way that it goes throughout the story. Of course, like I said, I do find the plot twist with Nova Prime as the bad guy to be cliche. Like, we already know the trope of, oh, the one in charge is actually the bad guy, and I've only seen that trope done well a handful of times. Like with Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, when you learn that the guy who hired him was the bad guy all along. Like, that one I think can work. But in this particular situation, like with Nebula, with Nebula, you begin to suspect that this lady's kind of on something when she says, do whatever it takes necessary. Even before that, you can start to wonder, is she the bad guy? And yes, she is. It's kind of fucking obvious. And if I'm gonna get, and again, I hate that when she goes full villain, all of her admirable traits are just tossed right out the window. Instead of being this kind figure who took a chance on the daughter of Thanos and let her join the Nova Corps, she's immediately like, just kill her and burn all the parts. You ruined my chances! And then pow, pow, pow. Like, are you an idiot? Like, why? What? Like, I can understand her desperation. That motivation I buy. She basically she thinks that Xandar is dying because of how cut off it is, and so she just thinks better to live under his boot heel than to live like this and kill ourselves. So, I can understand that. So, I can understand the motivation. It's just that once she goes to the dark side and she's revealed as the one behind this whole thing, it feels lame.
I will say I feel like it might have been a bit like if you look at it from a different side, I feel like it might have been just the bigger twist of it all that Nebula knew the whole time, basically. Like, that all of this stuff has been a plan from the beginning by Nebula to make sure that whatever they wanted to accomplish, because while she had huge hunches, she didn't know 100% what was going to happen, and who was involved for that matter, that she would be able to catch all of them red-handed, no debate. No, maybe they were involved, maybe they weren't. Literally everyone in that room thought that they were going to be ending Xandar, basically. And Nebula orchestrated that. Like, they thought they had something by orchestrating Yondu's death to get Nebula specifically to do the investigation.
Yeah, because they explained that she did have personal ties to Yondu in this continuity.
And realistically, she's the one who set them up to literally take out a warlord by going chomp chomp with a giant shield.
Yeah, pretty much. And again, I'll give credit where it's due. I liked that thing because, again, when you actually do pay attention to the scene, you can see that Nebula is already starting to figure out that the Nova Prime is kind of full of it. Mm-hmm. So I at least like that build-up in that scene, and I like that essentially from that moment on, it's just Nebula's game. Yeah, she's still missing a few pieces when she learns who the bad guy is, but with some quick investigating does alert her, okay, this is what they want, and this is probably what they're going to do. It's best to play along and let them essentially hang themselves so I can be there and get them all in chains. So I'll appreciate that. I at least do like that. Mm-hmm. So I'll give credit where it's due. And I love how they showcase Nebula even in that moment. Even when she has to essentially go rogue, so to speak, and get help from people that are in the seedy underbelly of Xandar with Howard the Duck, at the very least, she still keeps trying to follow the code. She only gets aggressive when she has to because guards have a shoot to kill order for her most likely. Mm-hmm. And then likewise, when she has the chance to offer a hand of friendship to Nova Prime, she still does it, even though Nova Prime decides to turn that on her. She just wants to work for the code. She dedicates herself to the Nova Corps, and even if the one who brought her in turned out to be twisted, at the very least, she still believes in the Corps. And by the end, I like that we see that. And I like that, and like I said, I like how we see her execute that throughout the episode. Like you said, it's Nebula's game all the way through, and she's just letting everyone else think they're in control. And I like how they build up to that. On top of that, it still has a good share of MCU humor. It's very nice. Like, Korg is still funny. I liked the reveal of Howard the Duck as her contact, which again is another example of him being funny.
I will be mildly nitpicky. I thought that Howard the Duck was a weird choice in there. Like, it just seemed a little clunky in the dialogue and stuff. Like, I feel like it could have been done better.
I kind of get that. I like, when we first saw the episode, we both thought that the guy who was going to be running the casino was going to be Rocket.
Yeah.
Like, we thought that was going to be him. Like, that would have been really cool. Mm-hmm. Like, to see because one of the employees is Groot, and the thing is, Rocket and Groot were friends long before they joined the Guardians, so why wouldn't Rocket be there? But no, it's Howard the Duck, which I guess mostly it's there to try and keep him in the to try and remind us, yeah, Howard the Duck's a part of the MCU because he was in the Guardians movies and he did appear a few times in season 1 of What If. Especially, and since it's a space setting, it kind of makes sense why he'd reappear here. I'll say this: I at least like that he's getting more prominent attention. But like I said, that was a fun reveal, and I love that it was Korg that recognized everything, while Howard's like, "Yeah, I have no idea what this is." And I love that the thing that got Howard to join Nebula on her crusade was the threat that his liquor license would be revoked. I like that. It's funny.
No, definitely. I appreciate the character. I suppose what it comes down to is there was this is again nitpicky thing. There was moments in there where the lines that Howard the Duck was giving were just, they felt like they belonged in a different sort of a setting. Like it was someone coming in, with just basic 90s TV English, sort of stuff, to a 1940s, detective story. It didn't flow quite.
I kind of get what you're saying, but to be fair, Howard is kind of one of those 90s era cliches. He's supposed to be supposed to be a very cynical and hard duck who, while his very existence is a joke, part of the joke is that rather than being all plucky and happy, he's just kind of a grouch and an asshole. So I think in that regard it fits, because that does fit Howard's character. And again, another funny scene was when Nebula went to him for help. She wound up collapsing his casino and actually managed to pull a lever on one of the slot machines, and she actually won, although she wasn't conscious to get her things. And Howard's like, "Oh my god, this is terrible! These things aren't supposed to pay out!" That was funny. That was legit funny. So, but I get what you're saying. It felt like he was out of place in comparison to everything else.
I would have loved to see it in a different sort of, see him in a different sort of setting. I would even have loved to see this whole same vibe of Nebula as a detective, Howard Duck as seedy underbelly friend, the criminal element friend, sort of a thing.
Yeah. Them
doing a story together. I think that'd be fun. It's just that with this, the way that some of the lines, some of the few more intense and emotional lines that Howard was supposed to be delivering felt they didn't feel like they belonged to him.
Yeah, I kind of get that, especially when he's the one that says, "Well, looks like peace is going to come back. Things are getting better now." It feels weird to have Howard say that.
Yeah, no, especially when this was the dude who was not even 2 minutes ago, "Well, if they're sad, they'll drink more."
Yeah.
Yeah,
that does feel weird. He does. So, okay, I'll kind of agree with you on that. Howard did feel a little out of place in that. But with that said, we both collectively agree that the episode was pretty good. Was it perfect? No. Like I said, the whole twist with Nova Prime being the bad guy is very much cliche, and it really does. And when you actually pay attention to the story, it does follow all the patterns you would expect for a noir story to follow. There's something twisty going on. There's something twisty going on. You got a hard-boiled detective who gets on the case wanting to solve it. Turns out the person who's behind it is someone they trusted, and then they got to go in for a final battle to catch them in the act and take them down.
And then the villain gets a chance at redemption, but then inevitably snubs the hero because sometimes you just can't save them all.
Yeah. That is flawed. But what I think what makes up for it is, one, I love how unique the premise is and how well they execute it. The dark shadows, the way that this crappier version of Xandar looks as we continue exploring it. I love having honestly, Nebula works as a gritty noir detective, and I think she fits in the setting perfectly. And I love how they express her, and I love how capable she is when she's dedicating herself to this. You really can see just how much she values the Nova Corps in every single one of her actions.
She had a better Batman vibe than Batman does.
Yeah. I love that. So I loved that. I liked the humor and where it worked, because it was put in enough places that it never felt overshadowed by anything. I love of course, all the unique environments that we see them going through, and yes, I still love the action. It was still kick-ass, and I did like seeing it going down. It does suck that Yondu was essentially acting as a sacrificial lamb in Noah Prime's whole scheme, which I'm guessing she had him killed and had this information just so that Nebula would be compelled to, solve the case and all that crap. But on the whole, I think the first episode of season 2 of What If was pretty good. Not great, but pretty good for what it was. Because, again, unique setting, very self-contained, does a great job at telling a story with the premise it was given, great main character, fun action, when, again, while story is kind of formulaic and villain is predictable, I think the stuff it does right might make up for the stuff that it kind of falters in, so...
Mhm.
Yeah, overall.
No, I 100% agree. Overall, I think that, like, I would love to, if I understand this is a one-shot sort of thing, I would love to see this, this universe continue onward in another storyline with these characters in it. Just because they are very interesting, and like you were talking about, there's a lot of, like, bigger, cliche type moments and everything, but I feel like the detail bits are really where it gets you in this story. It's how well each character fits into their role, and then how they do their role so well.
Yeah.
Like with Nebula, she really does come across as hard-boiled, going to go after and find the truth sort of detective. And at the same time, she also, they later then reveals to be not only that, but also an extremely patient, intellectual, pragmatic person who just manages to screw everyone who thought that they got the upper hand that day.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So
I appreciate that.
yeah. So again, overall, not a perfect episode, but a pretty good one and a good way to start the season. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Any last minute thoughts?
I think that's it.
All right then. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson.
And I'm Haley Dudley.
And I hope to see you next week when we look at the next episode of the season. So till then, I hope you have a good night and take care.